yeah, it's, I don't know. Either way, thank you for joining. We're going to talk about a few things today. Number one, safety communications. Bit more about some other things. Just hang on. I think somebody's at the door. What else could go wrong? Back in a sec. Okay, now that was weird. Amazon package. But anyway, we're back. So the other thing is just a quick little bit, an announcement of something that occurred later last week. And I'll talk about that towards the end. But looks like not a lot of people are on the stream. In fact, very few. But that's okay. Still got a question to answer after the talk, and so let's get into it. Let's just quickly review the chat rules. So remember, please participate. If you're logging into the chat, introduce yourself, who you are, where you're from, what you do, and yeah, so that we know who's who in the zoo, for instance. Now, the other thing is, a lot of times questions may come up, and if you know the answer, feel free, go ahead, chime in and answer the question. Your knowledge, your opinions count, and they're an active part of this. In fact, if you catch up to the stream afterwards, leave something in the comment section. I appreciate all of the comments and all the interaction. Now, the other thing beyond all of this, we don't all emerge from the womb being safety professionals. We have to learn as we go along. So be civil, no name calling, no insults. If somebody asks something that you think the answer is extremely obvious, answer it, but be nice. And remember, this is all discussion. It's not to be considered professional advice. Not at all. A lot of times people will make this assumption that YouTube is all professional advice. And that's not necessarily the case. Now, some videos, yes, are offering professional advice, but not all the time. And this isn't that place. I'm trying to build a community. I'm trying to, how should I say, gather together a group of safety professionals, whether you're just starting out or a seasoned veteran, and that we can work together to answer each other's questions and so forth. Now, recently, I moved my office from one room to the next, and so here we are. You see, I'm still setting up. Last stream, it was a black backdrop, and this one is a bit different. So I'm just setting up and working everything, but I like the way everything looks in here. So hoping it's going to work better and hoping the camera will actually stay in focus. Yeah, oh well, whatever the case may be. So anyway, getting on into it, part of today was about safety communication. And we've all done it. We have all, as safety professionals, decided that we were going to write a program and it would be out there, or a safe work procedure or whatever, and we posted it on the company website, or we emailed it, links to those that were needed to know, and we thought all was good. And you know what? Part of that, when I made that mistake, early on in my career, I was a consultant. I operated a small safety and first aid training agency, and I did consultation. And a lot of times it was write a safe work procedure, write this procedure, write that. And so you would go evaluate the group, and then you would make your recommendations and write your report, and maybe either a sample safe work procedure, a sample emergency response procedure, whatever, and give it to your contact. And that was it. If you weren't asked, and most times you're not asked for an implementation of a communication strategy or something to that effect. And so what occurs is you go with that mindset. And when I transferred and sold my business and started off as a full-time health and safety employee for an organization, I did the same thing. And you know what? It doesn't work. It doesn't work. If you operate the same way as a consultant when you become a safety professional working for an organization, you're going to run into some issues. And communication is just one of those issues. And that was the reason that I found is I got used to treating everything like when I was still a consultant. And it doesn't work. So what I want to do is talk about some of the pitfalls that I went through and some of the strategies that I've adopted. Now, if you're fortunate enough that you have a good communications person, a person dedicated to corporate communications in your workplace, awesome. If you have a staff that or a group of a department that is dedicated to corporate communications, awesome. And you know, my experiences have been hit and miss. Like I worked with a fella, his name's Brad, that did corporate communications, and he was excellent. His questions are, what do you want to say? What's the important? What's the intended audience? How do you want to go about it? And then he would take the corporate communication strategy, your desires, and put them together to something that would work awesome. And it did. And I learned a lot off of Brad, and I learned a lot about how to communicate, not just post information, but communicate. There's a difference. We'll talk about it. And it was awesome. But you may also have those communications folks that are, okay, what do you want to say? And as you're talking about it, they say, okay, well, this is what you need to say, and this is how you need to say it, and this is what you need to do, and this is the corporate mantra and mandate. So thank you very much. We will write your copy for you and give it to you. Once again, really and truthfully, that's also been my experience, and that's not necessarily communication, because we have to realize that there's information and there's communication, and understanding the difference between the two. And one of the biggest differences with communication is the two-way communication. So yeah, so let's get into it. Let's talk about it, and maybe, just maybe, and please, by all means, leave comments and in the chat or whatever. But just maybe, by the time we're done, we can have a better understanding of what safety communication needs to look like. Now, George Bernard Shaw said it quite well. The biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it's taken place. And that's a huge issue, because what happens is a lot of people think when they convey information that it's done. And that's not necessarily the case. But with communication, we have to understand why we fail. And there's three reasons. There's three big hits as to why we fail. First off, number one is the content. Honestly, if it is irrelevant, if it is poorly written and poorly conveyed, if it is poorly constructed, or there was no collaboration, you know what? Honestly, most of the time it's going to be a loss. And I'll take, for instance, this YouTube channel. I've put some videos up that I thought I worked on, and I put some good effort to them. And I thought that they were really good, and they've got like 30 views. And then I've put others up that I've also put the same amount of effort in and the same amount of work, and they've got thousands of views. So what I took away from that is understanding that there's only the content that's relevant to the audience. Now, that being said, there's still some messages that are very important to get across, and it's necessary to understand who you're going to get them across to and what that's for. We often will have, how should I say, an important message to talk about. But is it also important to the audience? Now, we have to understand that timing is a particular part of why we fail as well. Either did we wait too long to get the message out? And I've seen that. I've seen where I've investigated an incident. And yes, it was complex. But how should I put this? By the time it was done, and by the time all of the conclusions were drawn and everything was signed off by senior management, the timing for any kind of communication was lost. So you have to make sure that, are you getting that message out there as soon as it needs to be got out? Are you taking too long to get that message across? I'm not talking about the duration to get it out. It's the total message. If it's taking too long to get that absorption into your audience, then also you're going to fail. And if your message comes out in parts or in stages and a rollout process, and that takes too long, or it's too long between each part, then it's also going to fail. Now, part of these failures, when you look at all of these notions, is there's no plan. The content and the timing have to be part of your plan. Now, beyond that, you have to also ask yourself, are you supposed to be the one that's doing the talking? And I've done it before. Like when I first started out, I would create policy. And then I would be the one trying to communicate that policy. And really and truthfully, was that my job? Was that my duty to get that across? Is it my thing to communicate? Or should I have been in a supporting role? Should I have been the one that's helping with all of those talking points? So understand it. If it's corporate policy, is it you? Is it maybe supposed to be the CEO or somebody in the C-suite, the VPs and the AVPs, the directors? If it is corporate rules, is it supposed to be you, or is it supposed to be like a manager or a senior manager? Because especially if they're going to be tasked with doing the enforcement of these rules and all of those other processes, the performance management, maybe it's not supposed to be you. Now, if it's a health and safety program, the procedure, you know what? It might just be you as the safety professional. And certainly if it's a bulletin or communication of learning from an incident, it's most definitely likely you. So make sure that you also identify who's supposed to be talking. And that's commonly one of the issues that occurs. So you need to plan, and you need parts of your plan. So what you need to do, it's like a roadmap, honestly. And say you're going to take a vacation, say you're going to take a road trip of a sort, and you're going to have waypoints along that road trip. So understand your waypoints. And this is what I've learned that tends to work for me, is with a plan, you have to understand that your work that you're going to do needs a purpose. There has to be a purpose behind what you're going to do. And of course, you need to plan. As I said, with the waypoints and your different destinations throughout that trip, course correction isn't possible unless you have a plan. If you don't map out that process, you're not going to be able to say, oh, well, we got to steer around that, or we got to slow down before we get to that next point. So yeah, you have to understand that if you don't have that plan, you don't have that map, you're not going to be able to correct yourself. So failure is going to be imminent. That's just the way it is. You're going to fail. You've likely heard that old saying, failure to plan is planning to fail. It's the truth. So understand your communication plan and the parts. And what we'll do is I'll just quickly talk about those parts and we'll go into each one. So you have to, what is it you're going to say? Who are you going to say it to? When do you need to say it? And how long do you need to take to say it? How are you going to say it? And then how again? We'll talk about the how again. You got to stick around for the how again. So number one is what? What is the purpose? Is there a policy change? Is there a kind of program change? Is there a process change that's taken place? And what's the purpose behind it? Is this for prevention? Is this for a redirection corporately? What's the reason behind it? So when you understand the what, it also helps you to understand and how you're going to formulate the rest of that plan and who the key players in that plan are going to be. If it's change, do we have to exercise all of those change management principles that we've heard about and read about? Because that's the important piece. It honestly is. Understanding if this is going to be a paradigm shift, what do you have to employ to get that shift through? Change is tough. The old saying is, you may not like change, you're going to like irrelevancy even less. But that's the truth. People struggle with change. We all do. We're human beings, and what human beings like to do is we like to establish routines. Nobody says, and people will all claim to say it. They will say, I embrace chaos. I do. I embrace chaos. But no, you don't. Everybody likes to start a routine and create a routine around what they do. So understand that. The other thing is, what do you need to communicate in the notion of priority? What's the most important part of your communications that you need to get out first? And do you have to formulate different messages for different audiences within your corporate work group? Okay, it's really important to understand, because you may have to create a whole entire message around, say, a health and safety program shift. Or the company has done a vision casting and they've created a new vision, which often happens with strategic planning. And your health and safety program is undergoing a big paradigm shift because of that. And so do you have to have a different message for the C-suite folks and then one for the frontline workers? So you have to construct and look at your messages and then make your plan for the next step, which is who? Who are the people that you need to talk to? Who's the audience? And a lot of times, like for instance, I'll once again use the YouTube channel, and the notion behind the YouTube channel is that I will create a video, and I honestly didn't think it was going to take off. Like I did one, and I'll leave a link up in the corner regarding cell phone use in the workplace. And it is a problem, but I didn't think it was going to become as popular as I did. But when I go back and look at the audience and the people that are viewing it, it all seems clear. So what you've got to do is consider who the audience is, and do they care? Do they care about what you've got to say? And I'm hoping that they do. But can you compel them to care? One of the last things that you want to do is be insincere. And I've seen it time and time again, where people have decided that we care about how you feel. We care about your well-being. And you know what? Insincerity is bad because you can look like this guy. But you want to make sure that there's a reason for them to care. And one of the biggest tricks, and I'll reemphasize this again at the end of the video, that I've looked at is making it what it means to them. You all want to go home safely. You all have people that care about you and you care about. You want to be able to be with them. Nothing that you do at work is more important than what you do outside of work. And so make it so it's important to them from their focus, not how much necessarily you feel about them. And honestly, if you can convey that sincerity and you are genuinely sincere, then by all means, excuse me. And I've been very sincere about the people I've worked with, but I've still been accused of, Kevin, you say you care, but you don't care. Literally, that was ad verbatim what was said to me. And yeah, that's strange. But you want to make sure that there's a reason for them to care. So what do they take away from it? What are they going to take away from what you have to say or what you have to communicate? Then when? How long are you going to take to get this message across? Remember one thing. Always understand this, that when something occurs, the impact of it starts to decrease as the days go by. And so if you have an incident and you've been able to clear up and finish the investigation as quick as possible and draw your conclusions, then you want to get that message out there about those learnings as soon as possible. So understand, what's the timing? How soon do you have to get that message out there? How long do you have to create a rollout plan? Is it going to be done in little bits. And one of the things that I used to like, and I'll share this tip again at the end, one of these things that I used to like doing is when I had an investigation that I knew was going to take some time and it was going to be drawn out for a while. One of the things that I used to do is try to provide updates to all of the audience that needed to know about and would need to know about those learnings as we go along. And so having some situational reporting that you do to the C-suite group and to the workers involved is going to be a good strategy for you. It helps you, especially if you have a long drawn out process for the investigation and for the communication rollout plan. So if you're going to do it in stages, be clear with the timeline, and for heaven's sakes, stick to it. Okay. You don't want to say that we're going to be giving updates every Friday. And 3 Fridays go by and no updates. Pretty soon, guess what? You have no audience. I want you to picture if I was going to stream, and I promised you I was going to stream every second Saturday. I try to do it, but I don't make any promises because you know what? Pretty soon, nobody will show up. So same thing there. Understand that. Now, the next thing, and this is, a lot of people will say that how you say something and how you communicate something is actually more important than what you have to say. I don't know about that. I think that every step in a communication plan is equally important, because if you take out either step, it's not going to work. So pretty important that you, how should I say, understand that how you say it is just as important as what you say when you say it, because you might have to use a multi-pronged approach. One of the best things that you can ever do is understand this. Whenever you need to roll out something or do something, you need 2 other important parties. You need a champion and you need a collaborator. So you may need champions and you may need collaborators. Big hint, always understand your health and safety committee is a really good group for this. I'll leave a link to a playlist up in this corner regarding health and safety committees and their importance and what they can do to help you. And feel free to click on it. It'll show up soon, and just keep looking up there. But do you need to use a multi-pronged approach? Do you have to start with a CEO speech and then a section VP speeches, management speeches, toolbox talks, safety board communications, email blasts? You might use a multi-pronged approach depending on the impact and necessity of your communication and what your plan says way back in step 1. Remember, it's dependent on support and collaboration. An army of one is useless. So you have to understand that you're an important piece. Yes, you are as a safety professional, but you need the help of others to make this work. You need those champions and you need those collaborators as your support. So by all means, understand that you're likely going to have to be looking at some additional support. Do you need to train others first? You know, I've had lots of things that I've rolled out. And one of the things that I learned right away when a senior manager called me and says, "Hey, Kevin, I want to talk to my group about this part of your new program that you've rolled out. Can we meet and can you give me some talking points? And if possible, do you have any PowerPoint slides?" Oh, wow. And like there likely was a little light bulb. I was alone at the time, but there was likely a little light bulb up here. And yeah, that's huge. Understanding that you may need to train others and help others through your communication delivery is part of the how, and it should become part of your plan. What other supplemental strategies and methods are you going to need to use? Are you going to need to say, like I said, starting with speeches all the way down to toolbox talks? Are you going to need to consider creating PowerPoint slides using a corporate template for other people's slide decks? Are you going to need to be possibly a guest speaker at section and department get-togethers that will help you with this delivery? So always consider the how, and don't be afraid of trying new things. And I can remember once And I honestly think it was my buddy Brad that says, well, we can try it out, and if it doesn't work, we won't do it again. I mean, it's a good way to do it. And one of the things, I'll go back to the YouTube channel, that's one thing. I don't make certain videos or I don't use certain styles because, they didn't work. Now, how did you do? This is that how again part. Remember, that how did you do is just as important, and it's just an important piece. That evaluation piece, how did you get that message across? How well did it sink in? You need to follow up and determine both your saturation and absorption. Remember, saturation is how much information that you're conveying and communicating. Remember, information is just that, information. But how you're conveying it and bringing it to your audience is that communication. And then the other piece is, how much did they understand? How much did they take in? Do you need to alter your process so that you can do a better job next time? So remember that follow-up is extremely important. Now, the next piece is consider things where you have a captive audience. You can ask questions. Things like inspections, meetings, toolbox talks, where you can ask those candid questions. Remember one thing though, you're asking a question, don't get ticked off at the answer. You may get back, well, Kevin, that sucked. That was terrible. I didn't understand a thing. It took too long. The speeches sucked. They were terrible. Your slide decks were unintelligible. Remember, it's not about you. It's about the message that you want to get across. So if you make it about you, you're always going to fail. Okay? It's got to be about the message that you're trying to get across. I can't reiterate it enough. It's not about you. It's about, once again, that message that you want to get across. So take that time, get that message across, and get it across properly. And if you can learn something from it, take it back, take it away. It's an invaluable piece. We don't like criticism. We hate it. We hate criticism, but it's valuable to you. Without criticism, you won't grow. So remember, without criticism, you won't grow. So your safety committees, next piece, they are excellent. They are, and as I've said, once again, it should be right up there right now. Right now it's going to be there. But they're an excellent understanding for you of how your message got across, because if you've constructed them and your organization has created safety committees in the right way and comprised them of a spectrum of people across the organization representing both management and workers, then they'll be able to give you an accurate reflection of that communication piece and what you tried to get through. So, important piece. Always consider that, and consider involving your safety committees right from the start and all the way to the end on how you did. Super important. Now, you don't want to rely on a few things. Surveys, quit it. Okay. First off, people look at it as, okay, check mark, done. And they will go click, 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 click. Think about the last survey that you filled out. Think about how many you've ignored from the grocery receipt, from Amazon, from all different groups, and how you put it aside. Once again, how much of your audience is inundated with surveys and they get tired of them? Okay, so don't rely on surveys. Not saying they're not a good thing. Occasionally they are, and you might want to use it after you have a huge communication piece that you want to do. Okay, so that might be a good thing, but don't overuse them, because honestly, people will click past them, get rid of them, won't fill them out, etc. And if they're made to fill them out, then you know what? They won't do a very good job of it. Also, avoid the information-only safety boards. When's the last time that you saw someone ask a question to a safety board? Now, if they're doing that, well, there's a problem. But your safety boards won't answer those questions. They won't. Okay, they may have a question, they may be able to get it from the safety board and go up and say, oh, there's that piece of information I wanted, but will it necessarily have a follow-up answer to a follow-up question? Maybe, maybe not. So safety boards are a supplemental thing. They're not the be-all to end-all for communication. Same thing as safety books, etc. Remember, that's information. It's one way only. And the person is required to go up and take it all in. And if it's not well written and not well presented, they might not take it all in. The other thing is, don't rely on anecdotal comments. If somebody says something that's rubs you the wrong way and it seems like it's a harsh critique, ask them why. Dig in more, because you have to remember that you're going to be asked by the people that are in charge of you, how is this working? How did this work? How did this communication plan work? And if you rely too much on anecdotal comments, they may ask for other data or other proof. And especially if everybody said, good job, good job, good job. Well, they all told me good job. Well, where's your proof that you did a good job? So not just anecdotal comments, but they should be backed up by data. So once again, your communication plan, okay? What do you have to say? What do you need to say? What's the purpose behind your plan? Who do you need to say it to? Who do you need to involve? Who's going to be your champion? Who's going to be your collaborator? How long do you need to wait between what you've done and when you need to say it and announce it? And how long is that process going to take? How are you going to say it is just as important as what, who, and when. Not more important, but just as important. How you're going to get it across. And then, of course, how did you do? What's your process for evaluation? What's your process to understanding all of it? Okay, so now a trick or two that I've learned. If you're going to be launching some sort of a communication strategy or a communication, teasers during safety meetings and toolbox talks are an awesome thing to do. Okay, you can say, hey, well, this is going to be coming out, watch for it, and or even reveal your plan. By all means, these are good things to help you. And I mean, think of it like a movie trailer, but not as cool. Okay, it's a good way to help you prime your audience for your communication that's going to come out. But also the other thing is, make sure it's defendable. Okay, you want to understand that what you've got to say is, if you're saying something in your lead up to it, and then your communication plan and communication betrays that, you want to make sure that everything's aligned, okay? So, do me a favor, whatever you think, let me know in the comments down below. I appreciate all comments I get. And I try to answer everything as much as possible. Feel free to click that button and subscribe. I appreciate all of the interaction I get, and I once again appreciate subscribers. One of the other things to note here is later last week, I crossed the line for 1,000 subscribers. So thank you to all of you that have subscribed, clicked on that subscribe button, and logged in and been a part of the channel and a part of the community. Thank you very much. Because honestly, a friend of mine asked me a while ago, why do you do it, Kevin? Why do you bother? And to tell you the truth, I started it in the midst of the plague. Partly because I noticed that when I was doing just the odd bit of piecework and consultation, if I was presenting something or going for an interview, I thought my presentation skills are starting to drop. So I wanted a way that I could better my presentation skills, give back and create a community and give back to the community that's given me so much. So that's why I created Provoking Safety. It's why I did it. And also too, I love health and safety. I really do. It's a passion of mine. And honestly, it's been a driving force behind my life for a long time. There's other driving forces and more important ones, but it's one of those things that I look at and I enjoy. I enjoy the problem solving part of it. etc. So by all means, once again, thank you. Now, got a question, and I'm not sure. Hold on, I'm going to see if I can bring it up here. Just give me a second here. Okay, so here we go. And this comes from Safety Morale. Thank you once again. Okay, I'll answer that. I will answer that and how to identify hazards in just a sec. Let me answer this question first. So, can you explain failure mode and effect analysis, the FEMA, for risk assessment? Good question, really good question. Actually, what it's used for, the failure mode and effects analysis process, is mostly used in production. And what that's for is to identify risks or possible failures along the production line. So think of it like, we'll say producing cabinets. And so the first step is going to be mapping, planning, creating GNC, etc., or CNC, pardon me. And then you may have building the original frame, building the shelving, the doors, etc. Each step is identified and the probable failures that might occur in it. This also helps you when and it's mostly actually a root cause analysis process that you can go back and look at each step and identify the step. Fault tree analysis works very close as well. And in fact, failure mode effect analysis can become quite vaporous in the planning. And I don't use it very often in what I do now. Same thing as I will use a fault tree analysis more than a failure modes effect analysis. But they are very good in risk assessment so that you can understand the points in the production or the flow of what you're doing where you might have a failure and look at it and analyze it and prevent failure. And it can be used afterward to review backwards along the path where failure might have occurred and why, and help you for the next time. So they're good for both the risk assessment and the root cause analysis. But once again, it depends on the situation. I find, honestly, for root cause, most of the time what I resort to is 5 whys or a fishbone diagram using the 5 whys with each branch leading to the very end. Possibly a fault tree analysis, depending on what was involved, but I find a lot of times I will give that to the engineering groups. So I hope, Seifeldeen, that answers the question. Now, I don't know how to pronounce your name, Sachin, but how to identify hazards? And that's a really good question. I will leave a card up in this corner for the hazard assessment playlist, but realistically, understanding that identifying hazards is the foundation for health and safety. In fact, if anybody was to ask you what health and safety is, it's the correct identification of hazards, assessing them for probability and risk, and then implementing controls so that work can continue safely. So you have to look, what is a hazard? And a hazard is something that's going to interrupt that work and have a negative effect on the workers involved or the property and assets or the environment. So when you're identifying and assessing the tasks that you're going to perform, and that's where it starts. Look at the tasks that are being performed, and then what are those things that have a negative effect? So, for instance, we can take, let's take manual materials handling in a residential construction area. So, manual materials handling when nothing's built is not too bad because you are just unloading everything. You're unloading all of the material, you're unloading all of the building material, and you're starting to segregate areas. But as the construction moves along, you may have to take and you may have to carry, let's say, heating and ventilation parts and components through the framed area. And so now we have additional hazards. We have stairs, ramps, uneven ground. We have So we've created what's called tripping hazards as a result. We have barriers to egress, walls, doorways, framed up areas. And then we have the interaction with other workers because we may have other trades. So we have to, as we're looking at the tasks that we need to perform, we have to look at the possible pitfalls, these hazards, where there may be a negative effect on the workers performing the tasks or the property and materials that they're working with or the environment. And once we identify those, we have to look at the probability of them occurring and the residual risk. So the idea of putting severity and consequence together. What happens is a lot of times people will look at consequence as part of the actual risk. And consequence is just that. It's the result of the hazard. And so, yes, there are a lot of occupations, a lot of activities where the magnitude of failure is huge. Take, for instance, oil and gas construction. Now, by all means, workers there's a lot of possibility of fatality, but the risk of injury, is it as high as something like, say, as retail and community, continuing care, healthcare, etc.? And actually, the risk in those last three occupations of injury to workers is higher because of the prevalency, the amount of workers, and the amount of different tasks that they're doing and the time frame that they have. So calculating risk is just as important as calculating and looking at the actual hazard. Did I answer your question well, Sachin? Did I do it, or was it not answered well enough for you? Do I need to expand? So once again, thank you for all of you that have taken the time to like and subscribe and to ding that little bell so you get notified of new content and you don't miss a live stream. Thank you very much for it. I appreciate it. Once again, I also appreciate all of the interaction, all of the comments, positive or negative. Okay, good. I'm glad I answered your question. Thank you very much. One other question, like I said, that came up to me is in regards to safety presentation and toolbox talks. And and they asked me, and two questions that I've been asked recently, and I'll answer both of them right now. One of them was toolbox talks. Kevin, what's the most important piece? And you know what? Everybody has three fears. They have a fear of dying, but they have a fear of public speaking. And the bigger fear of all, of course, is the fear of dying while public speaking. You know what? They have come there and they're at that toolbox talk and they're there to hear what you're going to say, not hearing you saying what you're going to say. I know that doesn't make sense. So the best thing that you could ever do is prepare for your toolbox talk. Have your points, rehearse it, and prepare. And if you have to, say it 3 or 4 times in front of a mirror. You know what? No matter what, you're going to have stumbles and bumbles and stutters, but each time you do it, you get better. And that's the absolute truth. So preparation and practice are key when delivering a toolbox talk. That really and truthfully is the most important thing. I've seen people who have prepared flip charts and diagrams and little models and everything else. And you know what? Nothing is as good as somebody who delivers a good practice talk. Now, two people have asked me recently, what are some important points that you can give to a safety professional starting out? I'll leave you with one. But look forward to this, another video coming out. I want to talk about my top 5. It may turn into top 10, but just for the sake of brevity, it might stick at the top 5. But the number one thing I think that you have to take away as the most important thing that you can do as a safety professional is learn to suffer fools lightly. I know that may sound bad, but remember one thing is there are honestly those people who do not know, and they will ask you question after question after question. I have a young friend of mine who, when you say something, will pepper you with questions. But it's not because he's trying to be belligerent or adversarial. He just seriously wants to know. And so you'll always have those people that ask questions. Those are the good ones. But if there are those people that will tell you how much they know before they ask a question, no matter what, ignore that part. Answer the question. No matter what you think the motive is behind the question, always answer it. And don't be afraid of saying, hey, you know what? I'm pretty sure I have the answer to that, but I'm going to do a little bit of research and get back to you. Now, they may say, well, I'll give you the answer. Okay, great. Thank you. I'm still going to do the research, and maybe we can interface and talk about this more. So always look at it with being humble and understanding that no matter what, when somebody asks a question, don't think about the motives behind it. Just answer the question. Yeah. So if there's no other questions for the day, thank you for those that joined me. And honestly, if the weather is really nice where you were, I don't blame you for not logging in. Honestly, I don't. Because I would do that too. But thank you, Sachin, for the other question. Thank you, Seifeldeen, for sending in the question. By all means, all of you, keep the questions coming. I appreciate each and every one of them. Some of them, I'll admit, I have to research. But if you're a safety professional that doesn't do a bit of research before you do something, think back to the start. Maybe watch this video over again. So anyway, thank you very much. And I want you to do me a favor. Don't just think about safety. Don't just talk about safety. Be a safety leader. Be an influencer. And provoke safety wherever you are by doing it, walking it, and not just talking it. Okay? Take care. Bye for now.